First, last week, TV presenter Julia Bradbury bared her body and her soul to the nation in a very honest documentary, following her diagnosis of breast cancer through to her mastectomy and reconstruction. If you missed it, here's the moment she talks about saying goodbye to her breast.
One of the last things I did before the operation was to say goodbye to my left boob. I just said thank you for everything we'd been through together. You know, I've breastfed my children from both of my breasts, and I see them on my breasts. And I've, you know, jumped into the sea and been running and walking up mountains, and, you know, my boobs have been there for me. And I've got little boobs, and they're small and, up until now, are pretty perfectly formed.
Well, today, Julia joins us to tell us about the reaction she's received since opening up in the documentary. Please welcome Julia Bradbury.
Hello, ladies. Lovely to see you. Nice to be here. You had to show that clip, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Well, lovely to see you, and obviously also looking so well. We mentioned there that it really resonated with viewers, the documentary. Was there anything in particular that got a sort of the strongest reaction from the public?
I think generally people were quite surprised how vulnerable I appeared to be, and that I was happy to show that side. And I think obviously, what you want to try and do is to make a breast cancer documentary that covers all the complexities and different areas of breast cancer, and talk about everything from treatment through to future treatment and prevention, all of those things. And you just can't do it in an hour. So Kelly Close, who's the director of this, wanted it to be very personal. She wanted it to be touching, and she wanted it to be emotional, because I don't think we talk a lot about the emotional impact of cancer treatment, not just mastectomies and chemotherapy, just generally from that moment that you're told you have cancer, how that affects you and how that affects your family. It's a really, really big thing psychologically to handle, and it continues to be for the rest of your life. And I think that's just a very interesting way to look at it, and to realise that, you know, we've all got friends who've been through cancer. We've been through... I've lost friends to cancer, and you kind of seem to think that once they've got through their treatment, that's OK.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look OK, as you said, Jane, you know, you're looking good. So obviously everything in your life must be absolutely fine, but it genuinely is something that stays with you forever. The chance of reoccurrence, whether that's in 5 years or 50 years.
Yeah, I watched it last night, actually, and there were a lot of things that I could kind of, you know, be unfamiliar with, obviously. And the thing that you said, like, right at the start, or midway through, when you said it was about a club and you thought it was a club you would never be allowed to join.
Yeah.
And the shock of that and the diagnosis is something that will never leave you, because it's so impactful, isn't it? And for me, more than you, I think just telling anybody was the most traumatic thing.
I found...
And you've got kids, I haven't got kids, so...
I have found telling people... I find telling people quite hard, because then you see their reaction to you, and you see sadness in their eyes, and everybody becomes... Most people, kind people, are quite very sensitive towards you. And then you can see that feeling of sorrow that they have for you, and then that really makes me well up. Telling the children is a whole other level of pain.
Yeah, I remember my sister saying that when she was diagnosed again recently with secondary, and her first thought was, I can't bear putting my family through this again. It wasn't about her, it was that. And I think you don't really think about those things.
It was something that in the documentary I went to Maggie's, which is a fantastic resource. The Maggie centres are all over the country, and anybody who has cancer or is affected by cancer, you can call in, and they offer lots of amazing free advice. And I dropped in to see one of their psychotherapists, a guy called Troy, and we spoke about that, and he got me crying again, because you do feel guilty that this cancer diagnosis has crashed into your life, but also crashes into all of your friends and your family's lives as well. And there is a sense of... I mean, even now, there are women out there who have gone through much, I would think, worse treatment isn't the right phrase, maybe tougher treatment. Chemotherapy, I know, is immensely hard. Going through radiation is really tough. Having a mastectomy is very, very hard. But there's always somebody who's gone through a bit more than you. There's always somebody who's had it much harder than you. And you have to try and... That's what you have to grapple with psychologically as well. You have to frame your own position and then also think about others. And I've had some ladies in the secondary breast cancer community who've said, this is a wasted opportunity. We needed to know more about secondary and how to prevent secondary and more. And I agree that, you know, there is a lot still to talk about, but this wasn't meant to be...
Did you think about not telling your children?
I thought that was an impossibility because I thought they would find out because of what I do and because I had to cancel work and I knew that somehow... That's why I went public as well. That's why I controlled the story, because I knew it would come out. And the worst thing, again, was if your kids hear about it at school or through somebody else.
And did you get advice on how to tell them?
Not until afterwards, actually. There's another incredible charity called the Fruit Fly Collective that does that. You can go as a family and they try and explain to children what cancer is like. And they have all sorts of amazing resources there. They had a toothpaste tube that when you picked it up, it was super heavy. You couldn't lift it. And what they were trying to show children and other family members is that even doing the simplest tasks, like brushing your teeth, feels really hard. You know, Mummy gets up and she brushes her teeth, what Daddy does, if she's in the middle of chemo, and then she goes back to bed, and that's it. You know, she's tired again for another hour. How do you teach children that? And the two things I didn't think about, we did our best I've got two twin girls who are 7 and a boy who's 10, and we made a conscious decision that we would use the cancer word, but we didn't talk about death. We talked about treatment and possibilities, and that I was going to go through a difficult time and they'd need to be careful and sensitive. But one of my children asked, "Can I still hug you?" Which just...
Oh, that broke my heart when I read that.
Absolutely broke my heart. And my little boy, this was about a week and a half later, so he was obviously thinking about it. We were in bed reading together, and he said, "Mummy, is it contagious?" And again, I hadn't really thought about that because we know what cancer is to a certain degree, but they've lived through COVID. Their framework of disease is very, 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 very different to ours now. So just two things that I hadn't thought about. And as I said, the Fruit Fly Collective is brilliant at trying to break down those little barriers and explain it to you as a family unit. This is how you can talk about it together, and partners and family as well.
You did a lot of research, obviously, and you found ways of trying to, how can we say, to find out whether you're more susceptible.
Yeah,
right.
So I'm very interested. Sort of the TV journalist in me couldn't stop like trying to find out more. Obviously, it was very selfish. It was finding about me and my disease and what can I do. So I'm interested in prevention. I'm interested in reoccurrence. There are 2 tests that I did that are helping me now with a decision about going forward. One of them is called a SNPs test, single nucleotide polymorphisms. SNPs for short. So a SNPs are genetic. They're fragments of our DNA, and they're passed down by both of our parents.
So this isn't the BRCA gene test?
No.
It's not the same as that?
This is not the same. This is not the same as the BRCA gene test. There are lots of genetic tests out there. You can be tested for the BRCA gene, and I have to say, of course, there are ladies with the BRCA gene, but it's in the low percentages of women.
And what was the result of yours?
So my SNPs test that I had showed me that I have a higher risk of reoccurrence of breast cancer. Not high. So the average woman has a risk of around 10%, and I'm around 13.5%. So that puts me into the moderate risk category. High risk category would be 20%, and that's when I would have to really consider whether I should have a double mastectomy, whether I should have another breast.
So, I mean, sadly, we've run out of time already, but very quickly, where could people get this test?
So you can go on to juliabradbury.com, and I have put my road to recovery on that website, and it shows you everything that I've been looking into, and then it directs you to the SNPs test, to another hormone test called the Dutch test, just things that can help you make an informed decision about moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, well done for making the documentary and letting everybody into your emotional kind of journey.
Exposing yourself, literally.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's all about awareness and trying to break down some stigma and just make it
obviously
easier.
will have helped an awful lot of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me
Julia.
on to talk about it.
And if you at home have been affected by anything we've talked about with Julia here today, then there is also help available on our website.